Councilor Hadley, underneath each side of the dike, they were quite deep. They were 25 minimum feet, sometimes 30, 35. Yeah, it was pretty steep. So, okay. So, any more questions? And then I'll wrap this up. I hope I didn't go on too long. Okay. So here's my summary. Right now, the project is, there's three things about it. One is, it works, the portions that we built work really well. And I'm really pretty fired up about for you guys. You know, the pipe underneath the river has done just a significant amount of good for what's called the system hydraulics. The water just, now from the well field, just flies over there for that entire industrial park, for that entire side of town. And it makes such a difference because up until now, you have a potential for a lot of water use up in the industrial park that was served by basically a little straw, an old 6-inch pipe located on Highway 58. And the water had to go all the way through the system, come around, and come back up to get to the park. And now it's like you have this big tunnel that just shoots water right to the industrial park. And so it's done it's made a significant improvement to your system. Second of all, the pump station is, there were no issues with controls, no issues with electrical, the pumps work well, the tank works well. So, and I think, Robert,
we're operating it right now as we speak in operation mode until we get the SCADA guys up here to
do that
put all the SCADA online and automated.
Yeah, so and normally what I've found in these situations is, you know, you have a project where there's issues with the contractor and there's claims, and then the project doesn't work. That's usually what happens. So this project works well, and I feel like we really improved the water system as a result. So that's number one. Number two is we do have these outstanding claims. Like I said, I don't know where they're going to go, but you know, I feel that based on my experience, that they really are without merit, and it's going to be very difficult for the contractor to actually get a lot of money out of the city prosecuting these. I have a feeling they're just going to wither around. That's what they normally do. There'll be some mediation, and they will essentially go away. There may have to be a small amount of money paid, or some money paid. I don't know how much, but that's what I would see happening over time. Okay.
How long do they have to further claim someone about?
You know, I think it's 2 years. If nothing happens in 2 years, then the claim's expired. Although not 100% on that. Okay. So the last issue, though, that is, and this ties into what we're going to talk about, is that unfortunately, what the project has shown, though, is that you do have this trichlora theme. You know, there were 1 or 2 little blips of it in your well field. 2 times in 20 years, a little bit showed up in the sampling. And now, unfortunately, with the new well, it's clear that there is, you know, I don't know where it's coming from, I don't know how extensive it is, but it definitely is spread throughout your water in the city. And so, unfortunately, you know, the city, in terms of dealing with your source, you know, your job's not over here. And that's, it's very unfortunate, but it is the way it is. And so, that's this overall summary I have of the project at this time. I think that's item 5.1.
So Ed,
Yes. You just grab this meeting.
so when you had said earlier that we are at this point over, but I had said, so what do you mean at this time? And you said further on, you would tell me. So what you're saying is that as we proceed from here on forward, any charges that we incur are over and above what we anticipate, because we've kind of sort of maxed out.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and
Isn't that basically what you're saying? You started at $57,000 short.
yeah, it's basically come up as the project's gone. Yeah, and so you know, it's unfortunately it's something to think about in the future. Really, it pertains to if something major has to be done, like you know, the worst case scenario would be building a surface water treatment plant or something of that nature. That would cause you to raise
So
rates.
when you said that a carbon filter system to filter out the, whatever, triethylene
Yeah, the chlorinated.
something,
Yeah,
is really expensive. When you said really expensive, what do you mean really expensive?
it was just for the one well. It was, I believe it was around $270,000 to do that. And then you have the operational costs of it, which are
Really
about
ongoing expenses.
$15,000 a year. And that's just one well.
Just one well.
Yeah, if you were looking at doing it for multiple wells in your system, carbon very quickly becomes even more expensive. You know, you're talking about $1 million.
Right.
On the wells where you got the two that's, you're pulling, how far are all the wells apart?
Let's see.
Where the contamination is?
You know, Councilor Hadley, so the new well, well number 7,
Robert, no?
Yeah, well number 7, the newest well that has the highest level of TCE in it, is about 1,000 feet away from well number 4,
So basically.
which puts it about
Yeah.
800 feet away from well number 2.
well number 2. Yeah,
Now,
Pretty.
So-
So
we're
if-
fairly
what-
close, yeah.
Yeah, but the well 7 having the highest levels is the furthest away from the other wells. Well number 1 showed a hit, back in September, at the 0005, what is that? Yeah, the lowest detectable amounts they can test for. And then well number 4 had, consistent hits of, .00081, and the highest of 00102. The levels of TCE in 4 aren't even close to the level of TCE on well number 7.
Yeah,
Yet
well,
they're 1,000
unfortunately.
feet apart.
Okay, so have we seen a more consistent hits of that in the last year and a half than we have in the past?
We are seeing these hits on number 4 because the last council has directed us to test each well once a month for 6 months, so we did that. We found that well number 4 is the only one that is producing, this TCE at that level.
Mhm.
When we're required by the law to test our wells, we're only required to test at the entry point. So we test after chlorination, and that's all the wells pumping into the system. Then we test, send the sample in, we get the sample back saying there's nothing in there. Well, depending on which wells are running at the time, will,
Exactly,
the dilution,
exactly.
it will dilute and you won't detect it, but by direction of council, we were actually testing each and every well, and that's where we found that well number 4 is the problem.
So
Is
but
one
the
of the
testing
problems.
that comes out after as a trade and ready to go into the city is undetectable?
90% of the time, yes, non-detect.
All right. So when you talked about a carbon filter system, you said on one well,
Mhm.
would you put the carbon filter system on the point of entry into the system rather than on the well?
If you're gonna decontaminate or get rid of the TCE, I would suggest, if we're gonna keep well 4, to put it on the entire system, because if it's in well 4
It's gonna be an.
and well 7, and if we are putting well 7 online, yes, over time, there is a possibility that it does get into the other wells.
Okay,
It's a very large chunk of money, and it's gonna be.
Yeah, that's,
yeah, so it just makes more
It's
sense.
it's almost up there at the same range of building a surface water treatment facility.
So now we're at the point where, it's time to look at, doing the new test well. Because
Yeah.
we still need another well.
But that's not the new test well. Are you sure that's gonna be good too?
We don't know.
no.
Nobody-
no,
nobody
no,
can
it's
see
right,
it.
no,
Nobody
I-
can see it.
Boy.
That's why it's a test well.
Yeah.
You have to drill to find it.
I wish. Bobby,
Can you clearly define exactly what we need to do from here and what's needed to make this 100% complete?
In terms of, source.
Yes.
Or how do you mean, in terms of the water project, or?
to finish the water project to the point where we originally wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm looking, yeah. the big
Yep,
picture.
no, exactly. So really the big picture now is how to address, you know, unfortunately, we're almost worse off now with source than we were before starting the project, but we do know a lot now, that's the good news. Yeah, yeah. What you need to do though, what I feel, and this is really, it's your decision, this is not, I'm not getting any advantage of telling you this, is you really have three options, or four actually. The first option is you just do nothing and continue to run the system, and you'll have these low levels of TCE, maybe occasionally showing up in the entry points. And you don't do anything with well number 7, and it is what it is. Your second option is that, and I think this is the way to go, is that we try one last place to look for another source, another groundwater source, which is over in Highway 58. And again, this is based off of a geological study that we had done for the preliminary engineering report. And give that a shot and see if we could get a well that, one, is uncontaminated with this compound, and two, has a good yield. And then you have water, more source water coming into your system, and it's some distance away from the well field. So if something happens, if it gets worse at the well field, if it's clean, maybe it stays clean. You know, it gives you a little bit more protection. I can't make any guarantees at this point, but I would recommend doing it. Yeah, yeah, that's the second. Your third is, and you do that. If that doesn't work, then you start to look, unfortunately, at the more expensive options, and you look at either, as you guys were just talking about, Robert suggested, either putting this carbon system on your whole system, which is very expensive, or the worst case scenario is the city does have old water rights, and we start to pull water out of Salmon Creek, and we have to construct a treatment plant.
Could you pull the water out of Salt Creek?
No, they took, you know that, right?
I walked that whole thing the other day and took pictures of it.
I wish we could. Yeah, we can't.
So we can't, so they lost that?
That Pope and Talbot water right got taken away by the Department of Water Resources.
So we'd have to use Salmon Creek.
Salmon Creek, yeah.
The other question I had coming in, because this had to do with water rights, and exactly how all of these wells impact that as you shut down wells and turn on wells or don't use wells. Does that impact our water rights in the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the short term, what you have is you have several groundwater rights, and you've got a lot of capacity in that, which you as a city own, and can't be taken away. But it's important that you do what in the jargon that the water resource people use, that you exercise these rights. You continue to pull water out of the ground, you have equipment there. What I see happening over the long term, because this is what happened with all the surface water rights. Many years ago, when people were just coming here, the state was in the business of giving people water all the time. They wanted to get it out, spread it. Since the 70s, that has changed, and now it's the opposite. And they're in the business of trying to take water rights away, because water is becoming so scarce. That has affected surface water rights significantly. If you don't use the surface water right now, the state will take it away over time. I see over time that happening, you know, and not tomorrow, but maybe a couple decades, that process is going to start to happen with groundwater rights. So it benefits you to have more wells, and so you can continue to use the water, and then the state doesn't.
But if you have a well that's, like, earlier we have 2 that's been abandoned, how does that impact?
Those wells are still poked in the ground. There's still a well there.
Yeah.
An abandoned well basically is a well that's been filled in with either bentonite or concrete. That is what we call an abandoned well. These other 2 that we have, well number 5 and well number 3, are still intact, but we're not using them.
So they're just inactive?
They're inactive wells.
Yeah, and we actually, sorry to interrupt, Robert, we did that, but what we did is we just disconnected them from the system, but in terms of the water right, they're still there.
Yes.
And so they're still maintaining what's called the use.
So why are we using
Yeah, if we fill them up with cement, then that would negatively affect the groundwater.
But is there any way to use the water that actually comes out of Salmon Creek? Rather than the fish hatchery, like the fish hatchery there, where that water flow comes out of there?
Well, yeah, you'd have to build a surface treatment
You just have to-
facility,
yeah,
which you're looking up into the tens of millions.
Well, I would say 10, but it's a lot. You know, more money, I mean, I've worked my whole career here to keep you guys away from that. It's so dang expensive. And it's a couple for each million gallons a day to be produced, it's a couple $1 million. And that's when, you know, I know you're concerned about rates here. That's when all of a sudden you see the rates increasing 20, 30 bucks per month per person. And that's not what we're.
And it isn't surface water, one of the reasons Salem had so many issues this last summer of don't drink the water.
Yeah, that's correct. They had a.
I know, but it's because when the temperatures heat up, doesn't that impact your surface water and create more bacteria?
It does. He said they pull out a different type, you know, lake source. So the issue they had, I don't think you see have.
What's the pipe in the Hills Creek, is that still that?
I don't know.
Yes, and we do still have.
Yeah, he would.
15
We still have a tap in Hills Creek.
So we could get, if we need.
Oh, up at the, yeah.
Yes.
Right.
I
we do have
know there
that.
was a 15-inch pipe, I
Yes,
believe that's what it was.
it is a 15-inch pipe that we have.
I have kind of a different question.
No, no worries.
So as I was reading through the material at home, I noticed that for test well number 3, you said a 6-inch casing.
Mhm.
And when I was looking at test well number 1 and all the material, it was an 8-inch.
You know, I looked at the luck that we had. I think test well, you know, I would have to go back and look, because I know the other test well number 2 was, it may have started out as an 8-inch, but it was what's called telescope. It'll go down to 6 inches, you get deeper. And I'm pretty sure well number 1 was that way, test well number 1.
Test well number 1 was a 6-inch well, drilled all the way down.
Yeah.
And test well number 2 was also a 6-inch casing, drilled all the way down.
Well, I read 8.
You know,
Once the well becomes developed and actually becomes a well, then they will enlarge that casing
yeah.
for making it a production well.
Thanks, Ryan. So councilors, this is your opportunity to use as much information as you can. We have, once they move into the business section, we have 2 motions that we need to consider. The reason we had head count is so that he can answer those questions, so that you can be more informed about making the decisions you need to make.
So,
So,
you recommend that we do this test well, and what are we gonna do with it? I mean, if it's no good, we just wait, I mean, basically wasting the money, but.
Yeah. Yes.
Do we have the money to do that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, remember that, you know, as I said to you guys last month, that, you know, yeah, it's 37,000, but right off the bat, 20,000 under the grant. So it's actually 17,000.
We've got that money out.
Yeah, there is, your water fund can absorb that without changing the rates.
That's the rates, pretty important.
Yeah, no, that's what makes everything go.
And so, one thing that I was curious of is the status of all the wells, as in their lifespan, where they are, and kind of how functional they are, and how, what we can anticipate to see from them in the future. Because if we're looking at doing a test well, that we have 4 wells that really can function for a long time and do well, we don't want to do this, or maybe our other wells are not looking
so I think
well.
what you're asking is what is the importance of drilling a test well now in anticipation that we can make a well there? How important is it that we have that other well?
That is part of the question, but really I am looking for how those other wells look.
Function.
Yeah,
Life expectancy?
Yeah.
yeah, basically.
Well, it's a really good question, Councilor Whitney. And right now, well, for example, well number 6 is in great shape. We reconditioned it a couple years ago, put in a new pump, put in a new motor, and it went from 300 gallons a minute to 600 gallons a minute, which was its original capacity. Well number 4 is, in terms of equipment and yield, you know, it's solid. It's a low yield well. It's about 150 gallons a minute, plus or minus, Robert.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it does, you know, we now know that that is the primary source of low-level trichloroethene into your well field. That's where it all comes out of. Well number 1, it was refurbished a number of years ago. That's another big production well, and I think you'll probably get good service out of that for another.
We got another 20 years.
20
We're
years.
gonna have to recondition that well.
Yeah, the real issue that we see is well number 2, which, if you remember earlier, I said is the workhorse of your system. That well needs a complete refurbishment. The motor's very old, the pump shaft is very old, and it's our intent always was to get this water project done. We got a new well, everything be hunky-dory, and then we come back around and we can take that well off the line and do some work on it and get it back into shape.
Could we do
Yeah.
that now? I mean, would we have the capacity with what we have now, if we had to repair number 2, to continue to provide water at the level we are now?
If we get it done this winter, yes, I can do it right now. But if we try to do it in the summertime, we will not have enough water.
Yeah, we could,
No. And well number 2 is also a generated well. Basically, when the power goes out, generator kicks on, and it is one of the only wells that supply you with drinking water when you turn the faucet on.
So during the winter when we lose power,
Exactly. But
yeah.
we use a lot less water during the winter time. We have 3 million gallons in reserve. Well number 1 would be able to keep up during the winter months because we're only using 400,000 gallons a day. Summer months, we're using 1 million gallons a day.
do you lay awake at night worrying that that well is gonna go down?
Every single night.
even I do, important. We've been worrying about it a long time. That was,
It's one of my biggest fears.
yeah,
Yes.
it would qualify in the engineering jargon as a catastrophic failure.
And if it does fail and I have to go into emergency mode, I will be having to pull funds from somewhere to get it back online because of public health.
Thank you. How you doing, council? Any more questions?
Can you continue on? You were listing out what the progress status is of each well in number 3 of the next one.
Number 3 is, it was CO2, right?
Yes, you
That was, and long ago, and I'm not trying to flip here, I understand it was running and the mayor at that time had bought a huge new fish tank and all the fish died in it. Because the well, that was the only well on it and it had a bunch of CO2 in it and it depleted the oxygen of the water in the fish tank. The bottom line is that you just can't, it produces like this bubbly fizzy water that screws up the water system.
Can we sell it?
I've always thought about that.
It has been looked into,
Yeah.
but the levels of CO2 weren't high enough
Right.
for the bottling company that was interested.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah.
So it's high
Do you
enough
like
to not
light
be,
bubbles?
yeah, it's high enough to not work in drinking water, but it's
Yeah.
low enough to not sell and make money.
Darn.
Yeah.
However, there are treatment processes that can take the CO2 out, which are available, so, you know, if we do get to a point where we absolutely have to use that, we are gonna have to spend a lot more money to make that water good, but it is available.
So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, where's 5?
Now 5, the primary issue with 5, and again, Robert, you know, tell me where I'm going off the tracks, but these wells are all close together out in that well field.
Well,
You know,
4, 5, and 6 are within 150 feet of each other.
Yep, and they fight with each other. When you run them, you know, basically you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And 5 was, in particular, you turn that on, and all of a sudden the yield would go down from the other wells that are running, and it would drop the water level in the well to the point where you start to pull oxygen into the system, which really screws up the water system. It's basically hard to function, it's not impossible to function. So well for the number 5 for that reason was also taken off.
Why were all of them so close together anyway?
You know, I wasn't there. I don't, yeah, no, they were all, you know, they were drilled from, I think, well number 1 and 2 were put in the 50s, Robert.
I cannot give you that answer.
I think it is, that's what I remember, and then, you know, through the 60s, well number 6 was drilled in 84, the last one. And yeah, they just, I figured well, we're getting water, let's drill here.
I mean, you have that many wells, you should have them spread out, I would think.
That's, and you know, that's another part of our logic of trying to get the well number 7 was almost 1,000 feet away. And now if we did do the test well over at the highway, you know, to try and get a well that's at least a little ways distance from this whole, you know, conglomerate of wells that you have.
Well, the nice thing about the wells that we have is they're all drilled in river rock. We're basically in one big river basin at the tail end of an old, what do you call it? Glacier. So it's very porous. The aquifers down here are full of a lot of water. It's just getting to the right level of river rock or the right location to get that good pocket of good, clean, flowing water in the aquifer. Those pockets do change. As you go drive down the river and you see the river constantly changing shapes, well, that's what's happened over thousands of years, and we just gotta find that happy spot. Correct?
No problem.
Appreciate, you haven't got much, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Is that the only option to build a test well, is right there on Highway 58, or was there other options?
We, unfortunately, for all practical purposes, it is. And one of the reasons is, you know, we had this study, we looked at the whole town. And when you drill a municipal well, right off the bat, you have to have a circle that's 100 feet in diameter. So you have to take almost an acre of land around it where there's no sewer lines, there's, you know, no dumps, there's various other leach fields, etc. And when you start to do that in Oakridge, it gets, all of a sudden it gets really difficult to find that.
So
And
did
so
anybody look at Osprey Park? I'm curious.
that's down at,
Oh, way down there.
we did, and it just didn't look, the geology didn't look at that good at that point. There was, one thing I didn't mention when I was talking about back in the past, is probably, there was a really good geological study done of this whole valley by a firm called CH2M Hill back in 1991. And they defined the geology fairly well here. And one of the problems is as soon as you get away, and I think this is actually why all the wells are close together, as you get not very far away from where the well field is today, and you just run smack into bedrock. You know, but because it's this deep valley, the sides come up pretty quick. So by the time you get to Highway 58, and that's always been one of my fears, is that's what held us back from drilling over there is, well, are we just gonna hit bedrock right away? And, you know, it's gonna be a dry hole. And so that's another reason over at Oakridge, that was an issue we were considering.
So what if this is a good spot? Does that mean we're gonna build this huge unsightly big well right there in the middle of Greenwater Park? What does that mean? What is the next step? Cause I mean, this is Greenwater Park.
Do you know what the pump houses look like?
No, that's what I'm asking. What is it going to look like
It's
in the park?
Well, it would be of minimal impact, actually. When you have the well come out of the ground, we would probably have the actual top of the well, it could even be below, what we call below grade in a manhole. And then essentially you have a little pump house there, which might be, you know, just be a very nondescript building that people would look at and just think it's a bathroom or something.
So fairly
Say,
small.
yeah, 6x6 or 8x8 little cement masonry unit building. And yeah, that was something that came up. Plus we're locating it, thanks to Rick and also Robert. There's a bunch of trees when you
Yeah,
come
that's
in.
what I was looking at.
Yeah, so part of that was for aesthetics, that, you know, it's shielded by those trees.
So how about, well, if the highway was to expand, doesn't interfere with anything?
As long, well, Councilor Hadley, as long as it doesn't go over, obviously, you know, structurally, it doesn't run over top of the well.
But how much footage is there from the
right of way.
right of way there?
The right of way is, if you're looking at your map, the highway right of way is,
Is that
no,
like
I think it's quite a bit.
yeah, so this here is the highway right of way.
The white line is the
Yeah,
highway?
Yeah.
that's a good 90, we're
I don't-
90+ feet from the
Yeah.
highway line.
I don't see it expanding. And I can't imagine any reason. You can't tell the future, obviously, but that would be, you know.
Big growth in Oak Ridge.
Yeah, you know, one can always hope. One.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions? I don't wanna push you, if you wanna ponder just a little bit and make sure you've asked all the questions you need to, this is your chance to do that, so I wanna make sure that you do that.
So how are we gonna get it from here? I mean, if we were to put a well there, do you have an estimate of what it's gonna cost to get it where it's gotta go?
I don't, go
If you
on.
look to the east of the test well site, you'll see a blue line that stretches across Highway 58 and then goes to a red arrow that's got an H.
Yeah.
That's a 6-inch main. We would run a 6-inch line from the well site to that, cut in a T, and you're connected to the
So
system.
the H on Odell or the H on Highland?
the H in Greenwater's Park is a fire hydrant.
Oh, this one down here.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yes.
down
Yeah,
here.
no worries.
Okay.
Okay, got it.
So, a majority of the pipeline is already there, we would just have to put in a short chunk and a T.
Okay.
Just across the highway and back into it.
Yeah, no, we did, in some ways, it's, yeah, it's pretty good luck. If you have the transmission, yeah, if you can get the water, you can just tie right into the existing system. And that is that 6-inch line I was talking about earlier, that used to serve the whole park. But for the capacity of one well, that 6-inch line is fine. That's not an issue at all. And so, you know, you could have a decent flow coming out of that well, 500 or 600 gallons, and that can easily be pumped into the system.
Has anybody tested all the houses right there, cause they got all wells across the street?
I've looked at the drill logs, Counselor Hadley, the ones that I could find. And, you know, I mean, it's all bank run, especially, I forget the name of the construction firm.